The night she was stood up did not begin with tears or anger, but with hope so fragile it trembled inside her chest like a candle in a storm. Emily Carter sat alone at a small round table near the window of an elegant downtown Chicago restaurant, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her phone face down beside her plate as if ignoring it might protect her from disappointment. Outside, the city glowed with warm lights and moving lives, but inside her heart, everything felt suspended in a quiet, aching pause. She had promised herself this blind date would be different, that after years of loss and loneliness, maybe God was finally answering her prayers in an unexpected way. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can change a life, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, because stories like this are reminders that hope is never wasted. Emily had not always been this cautious with hope. There was a time when she believed love would come easily, the way it did for others she watched from afar. Raised in a small Christian household in Ohio, she grew up believing in faith, patience, and the idea that what was meant for her would find her. But life had tested that belief harshly. She married young, loved deeply, and lost suddenly when her husband Matthew passed away in a tragic car accident just 3 years into their marriage. The grief hollowed her out in ways she never learned how to explain. Friends tried to help, church members prayed over her, but nights were long and quiet, and she learned how to survive by keeping her heart guarded. Years passed, and she moved to Chicago for work, telling herself the city would help her start over, even if love still felt like something meant for other people. The blind date was not her idea. It came from a well-meaning coworker named Rachel, who insisted she had the perfect match. A man described as kind, successful, and serious about faith. Emily hesitated for weeks before agreeing. She prayed over it, asking God for peace, asking for a sign, asking for strength if it went wrong. On the evening of the date, she wore a soft blue dress that reminded her of calmer days and a small silver cross necklace that rested just above her heart. She arrived early, as she always did, believing punctuality was a form of respect. The host smiled warmly and led her to the table, mentioning that her date would arrive shortly. Emily thanked him and sat down, unaware that this night would test her faith in ways she never imagined. Minutes passed, then more. She checked her phone discreetly, seeing no messages, no missed calls. She told herself to be patient. Traffic happened. Emergencies happened. She bowed her head briefly, whispering a quiet prayer for calm. Around her, couples laughed, glasses clinked, and waiters moved with practiced grace. The smell of fresh bread and roasted garlic filled the air, but her appetite faded. After 30 minutes, embarrassment crept in, settling heavy on her shoulders. She imagined the looks from strangers, the silent assumptions, the familiar sting of feeling forgotten. Memories resurfaced of hospital waiting rooms, of unanswered prayers, of sitting alone with grief while the world moved on. An hour passed. The waiter returned gently, asking if she wanted to order. Emily forced a polite smile and said she would wait a little longer. Inside, her heart was cracking. She wondered if this was a sign she had misheard God, that maybe she was foolish to believe she deserved love again. Her fingers tightened around her napkin as she fought the urge to stand up and leave before tears betrayed her. She thought of calling Rachel but stopped herself, unwilling to explain the ache blooming in her chest. She stared out the window, watching reflections blur, feeling invisible and small. What Emily did not know was that behind the closed kitchen doors, another life was unfolding in quiet urgency. Daniel Brooks, the head chef and co-owner of the restaurant, had been moving through the kitchen with focused intensity, checking plates, encouraging his staff, and ensuring every detail met his high standards. Cooking was more than a profession for him. It was a calling shaped by loss, faith, and redemption. Years earlier, Daniel had walked away from a promising career to care for his aging mother, learning patience and humility in the process. After her passing, he poured his grief into food, believing that nourishing others was a form of service, a way to honor God and the love he was raised with. Daniel was not supposed to be involved in any blind date. In fact, he avoided them entirely. But earlier that week, his pastor, a man he trusted deeply, had spoken to him about Emily. The pastor described her gently, mentioning her faith, her loss, and her quiet strength. Daniel listened politely but resisted. He had his own scars, his own fears of opening his heart again. Still, something about her story lingered with him. He found himself praying for clarity, asking God if this was a step he was meant to take. That night, he decided he would simply observe from a distance. No expectations, no promises. As Daniel stepped briefly into the dining area to greet guests, his eyes caught sight of Emily sitting alone by the window. He noticed her posture first, composed yet fragile, like someone holding herself together through sheer will. He saw the way she glanced at her phone and then quickly away, the way she smoothed her dress as if trying to steady herself. Something stirred inside him, a recognition deeper than curiosity. He asked the host quietly about her, and the truth unfolded quickly. Her date had confirmed but never arrived. No calls, no explanations. Daniel stood still for a moment, the noise of the restaurant fading into a dull hum. He felt a weight settle in his chest, not pity, but purpose. He thought of all the prayers he had whispered about timing and obedience. He thought of the countless sermons about being present when God calls, even when it is uncomfortable. Without overthinking, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He stepped back into the kitchen, removed his apron, smoothed his shirt, and took a breath that felt like crossing a threshold he had avoided for years. When Daniel walked toward Emily's table, she barely noticed at first. She was too busy rehearsing her quiet exit, too busy convincing herself she would be fine when she left. But when she looked up, she saw a man standing there with calm eyes and a gentle presence that immediately softened something inside her. He did not speak in dramatic tones or offer excuses. Instead, he carried an assurance that felt steady, as if he had been led there with intention. In that moment, Emily sensed that this was not coincidence. The embarrassment she felt moments earlier began to loosen its grip, replaced by a cautious curiosity. The rest of the evening unfolded differently than any date Emily had experienced. There was no pressure, no performance. Daniel arranged for a simple meal, explaining through gestures and actions rather than words that he wanted her to feel cared for. As courses arrived, Emily felt herself relax. She noticed the thoughtful flavors, the balance, the warmth that seemed infused in every dish. It felt less like dining out and more like being welcomed. She realized how long it had been since she allowed herself to receive kindness without suspicion. As time passed, Emily found herself reflecting on her journey, on how often she had mistaken silence for rejection and waiting for abandonment. Sitting there, she felt seen in a way that startled her. Daniel, in turn, observed her quietly, respecting her space, honoring her pace. He recognized the signs of grief he knew too well, and felt gratitude that God had trusted him with this moment. Neither of them rushed to define what this encounter meant. They simply allowed it to exist, sacred and unforced. Near the end of the evening, Emily excused herself to the restroom, standing alone in front of the mirror as tears finally slipped free. But they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of release. She whispered a prayer of thanks, acknowledging that even when plans fall apart, grace can still arrive. She returned to the table with a lighter heart, feeling something she had not felt in years, a quiet hope grounded not in fantasy, but in peace. As the night drew to a close, Daniel walked her to the door, the city air cool against their faces. There was no dramatic promise, no rushed declaration, just an understanding that something meaningful had begun, something rooted in faith and patience. Emily stepped outside, realizing that being stood up had led her exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes the absence of one person makes room for the arrival of another who has been waiting all along. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment below and share what part touched you the most or reminded you of your own journey. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if this story has moved your heart, if it reminded you that God's timing is often hidden but never wrong, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps bring more stories of hope and second chances to those who need them most. Emily went home that night not with certainty, but with something far more powerful, the renewed belief that love, guided by faith, always finds its way, even through the moments that feel like rejection.